It's time for National to come out with a meaningful climate change policy which will resonate beyond the farm homesteads and retirement villages of the Hauraki Plains. Maria Slade writes in this week's Flipside. Maria, Scott Simpson made a bit of a funny appearance at the Climate Change and Business Conference in Auckland last week. Tell us a little bit about that.
It's fair to say he wasn't a hit at the gathering. Yeah. In fact, he got some laughs and some groans, really, when he said that, you've got to remember it's 2050 is the net zero target, not 2023. We've got time up our sleeve, which puts him at odds with just about every other world leader. It makes you sort of think, where are the Nats at with their climate policy? And I had a bit of a trawl through their website this week, and there's precious little there. Maybe the website needs updating, but there's very few comments regarding climate action at all. And even at the conference, in a later panel discussion, Simpson was asked about a number of issues like bringing permanent exotic forests into the ETS, and he sort of demurred and said, well, there's some issues there, but I'm not going to reveal our forestry policy. Right. And he kept saying, look, we agree with the general direction of travel with what the government's doing, but we would potentially do it differently. And then when asked, how would you do it differently? Well, I'm not going to tell you today. So you start to sort of say, well, when are you going to tell us, Scott? When? You are the climate and environment spokesperson of the major opposition party.
And I suppose, in fairness to him, you can kind of understand him being a bit on the fly on the first night, right? He was in place of Christopher Luxon, who was supposed to be there, and then he filled in at the last minute. But, I mean, from those press releases that they have put out, what can we tell about their position on some things?
Look, we know certain things, like Simpson is also the MP for Coromandel, and of course they've got big issues there with rising seawater levels and a lot of infrastructure right by the coast. And the government has released its adaptation policy, but then the big question becomes, well, who pays for some of this mitigation? Is it the ratepayer, the taxpayer, the private property owner? So as the local MP, he's got some genuine concerns there. But he just doesn't seem to go a great deal wider than that. He did say that the national government, the National Party, I should say, doesn't agree with the EV subsidies, and so a national government would do it differently. Again, how, he doesn't go into. Right. It's just that lack of detail, and given that he is the climate spokesperson, I would have thought a year out from the next general election, you'd be starting to expect a bit more. And you sort of think, well, he's the MP for Coromandel. Surely environmental concerns, the home of Jeanette Fitzsimons would be preeminent there. But if you sort of drill down into it in the Coromandel, other than Jeanette Fitzsimons' tenure, it has been a National Party stronghold. Something like 40% of the population, or 46% of the population, are over 55. A good third of the adult residents draw a pension. So there's a certain demographic there, and perhaps he is trying to resonate with some of those people in saying, look, you can't affect climate change with the lights out, which is effectively what's happening in Europe now with the energy emergency we're seeing there. And I think, a lot of people would potentially agree with him. Certainly at the climate conference, you listen to the likes of the Greens' Julianne Genter, and she's saying, well, look, effectively my children have no future. It's all very dramatic. And I think, there's a lot of Middle New Zealand that wouldn't be turned on by that. And so they would want to hear from National, look, what are some of the alternative ways of doing it? And we're just not hearing it yet. The next election is theirs to lose, in my view. And, I would have thought it's about time we started to hear some policy that might resonate with the centre.
Do you think that they just don't think that the centre cares about climate change? I mean, how big an issue do you think this is boiling up to be for the election next year?
Potentially they think the middle doesn't care. But, I would say that's not a very safe assumption. I think when you look at a lot of the news in recent months of the dramatic weather events we've seen in Europe, forest fires, floods, people, I think, are becoming generally aware that time is running out. There is a clock ticking on this, and we do need to start taking some action. So I wouldn't assume that Middle New Zealand doesn't care.
And Labour and the Greens have been increasingly criticised for their approach to this as well, haven't they? There's surely some point scoring to be had.
Yes, of course they have. They've been far from perfect. They've been pretty slow on a number of things, and a lot of things like the ETS are unpopular. So yes, I would have thought there's heaps of ground there for them to score some points. So let's rattle the dags. Let's start hearing
Come on,
it.
National. Where are you? All right. That's this week's Flipside with Maria. Thanks very much for your time.
Thank you.